right, we are rounding this up. Can you believe it? We've talked about connection. We've talked about the psychoeducation. We are right in routine. And as we've talked about routine, I just want to ask you, how's your self-care going? And what about reframing? How are you doing reframing? Getting a different frame through which you're looking at life, your past and your present through. And now we're going to talk about one of my personal favorites, and that's something bigger. And as we started this class, I asked you the question, so how are you? Deep down inside, how are you? Do you feel like there has to be something more? And if we think about our longings, if we think about what God's placed inside of us, that there's this God-shaped hole that He can fulfill. And we're created actually for something great. Do you feel the tension? We're created to do something that's amazing. We are created with a purpose. And when we connect with Him and the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, we're supposed to advance the gospel of the kingdom. We're supposed to be missionaries. I love the saying that I heard that if you're a Christian and you're not on mission, if you're not a missionary, could you be an imposter? And so what's our mission? Our mission is to advance the gospel of the kingdom. Our mission is to bring His kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Our mission is to love those who need loved, to love the unlovely. And so I want to challenge us in this session with just this, that everyone, you and I, need a vision bigger than ourselves and a team to pursue that vision with. And so this kind of builds on itself. That if I haven't matured, if I haven't changed my brain, if I haven't thought about what I'm supposed to think about, if I have immature relationships with others, if I'm not connected with God, then this isn't going to happen. But this is what I'm born for. There has to be something so much bigger than me. And this is what I stumbled upon when I was dying, when I had that encounter with Jesus. And He said, Lori, this is the you show. It's all about you. 90% of everything that you do is you. And in the middle of all that, I want to ask you what I ask myself daily is how much is enough? How much is enough with the American dream? Or how much is enough with the things that we can possess or the accolades that we could have? How much is enough? Versus what's the original design that we were created for? And how can we partner with heaven in bringing His kingdom on earth as it is in heaven? And how could we advance the gospel as we love? And so these are really, really critical questions. And so as we think about our purpose, so what's our purpose on earth? And they did some surveys with Christians, and they asked the Christians, if you could ask God one question and God would answer your question, what would you ask Him? And they'd said, well, I want to know what I'm here for. And I want to just challenge us, if we're at that level of question, then we're in trouble. What is our purpose? We're supposed to take the talents and the strengths and the gifts that we have and use it to glorify Him. And so if we're a hairdresser, then we utilize doing hair to glorify Him. If I'm a trauma therapist, then I utilize the knowledge that I know about trauma to glorify Him and to see people healed through their traumatic experiences. If I'm a dentist, then I use my knowledge as a dentist to help people with their oral care and advance the gospel of the kingdom. And so what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to know Him and make Him known. Let me read you this. It says, passion and destiny aren't hidden somewhere out there in a locked box. And if you could only just find the key, then you'd know. It's like a canvas that you begin to splatter paint on. As you go through life, you build it. As you're brave and curious, things start to emerge that you can commit to. And then finally, when the glitter and the adrenaline wears off and everyone else says you can't, you can and you do. That's what it looks like. To dive into our purpose and our destiny And so again, it's not when we get there, when we finally figure out what that is, it's about being fully alive and fully available in the moment. So we start where we are. World changers are average people that have decided to do something now. There's a big difference between a doer and a dreamer. I wonder how many people at the end of their lives, if we would ask them, did you do everything that was purposed for you to do? Or did you just dream about doing it? What about, again, I love this language, when the glitter and the adrenaline wears off? What about when we show up and nobody else does? And what about doing the behind the scenes, the stuff that nobody else wants to do? What about day after day and week after week and month after month and year after year? What does it look like? So let me even tell you just a minute about the backstory of this curriculum. You know, I've been practicing as a therapist for over 30 years. And when I first got out of school, I spent 10 years on a psychiatric unit with suicidal and homicidal adolescents and adults. And the things that I did then are different than what I would do now. I've grown and I've progressed. And then as I started working in the areas of trauma and started traveling around the world into areas of devastation, I knew that if God didn't show up, then I might as well go home. And he keeps showing up. He showed up every time. And then at one point in the middle of all of this, then I decided to just put everything on hold and pray and fast and press into him and undo the things that I didn't need and then pick up new things that I needed, and then to go and get a really good biblical basis for all of the things that we're doing. And so there are hundreds and thousands of hours that have gone into this. And so as you're watching this, you're not watching what I can give to you in this hour. You're actually watching a cumulative of experiences over the last 30 years with countless hours. They say that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. There's been well over 10,000 hours, and there's been grappling and wrestling and what do I like to do and what can I not do and how can I utilize my strength mix to help others. And so it's this thing that's just emerged. And so you start with what's in front of you. You start with what's in your hand. And with me, I had degrees in my hand that mixed theology with therapy. And I started with what was in front of me, with the people that needed help. And I did what I could that day so that I would learn and I would grow and I would help so that it's grown and it's progressed into what it is today. And so we're meant to help those that aren't getting help. Could it really be the body of Christ's job for everything that we see and we're complaining about? Could it be actually, what do we need to do? And instead of blaming it on the government or the system or the this or the that, could we say, so what's our part in it? And how can the church be the answer to it? And so I want to read to you what I read periodically that really stirs me. It says, "Dear church, stop gathering around the name of Jesus while ignoring the ways of Jesus. Remember the poor, feed the hungry, welcome the stranger, serve the least. Visit the prisoner, clothe the naked, deliver the oppressed, and rise for the marginalized. He waits for us there." And so I don't know about you, but I found Jesus here in the middle of the brain and in the middle of neuroscience and the psychoeducation. I found Jesus in looking at the eyes of those who need to reframe and who need to find Jesus. I found Jesus in walking with people and walking alongside people as they discovered the Christ to the point of salvation. And I found Jesus as I've seen people change their neural pathways and are transformed by the renewing of their mind and who learn to walk in freedom. I found Jesus as people become more mature and they don't hurt and leave a wake and a trail of hurting, because hurt people hurt people. I found Jesus in the trenches. I found Jesus here. And we won't be in the same trenches or we won't be with the same issues, but all of us need to get outside of our four walls and outside of ourselves for something bigger. And it's here that will find Jesus, that aching and that longing that there has to be something more. Because once you get one, then you need two. And once you get two, then you need four. Or once you get the new car, as soon as you drive it off of the lot, and the first day that it has a scratch, or you go home with an electronic, or your phone will have an upgrade soon, or your computer. And so how much is enough? And what's really going to matter billions of years from now? And so if we're healthy, if he's done it in us, then he'll do it through us. I have a rule: is you get one, you give one, in you and then through you. And so we think about, well, then how can I stay safe? We're talking about sharks and piranhas, the people that are hurting, the people that are marginalized, the people that have been wounded. Hurting people hurt people. And so how can I stay safe? And so for me, it's that I become overwhelmed with the cry of humanity. But it didn't start there. It didn't start with the cry of humanity. Remember where we first started together? It was the connection with God. When I'm connected in the presence of God, I can't just stay there. He's so great, and he's so amazing, and he's so good. And he starts to share with me his heart, and his heart's for the nations. If you remember Jesus, when he was crucified, dead, and buried, when he rose from the grave and he came back and spent time with his disciples, and then he ascended into heaven, he could have taken the disciples with him. But he left the disciples on assignment here. It's actually our responsibility to partner with the King and to do what he's called us to do on earth as it is in heaven. And so I go into the presence of God and I hear his heart for the nations and for the people and for the issues. And he says, who can I send? And I say, here I am, send me. And then I go, and then that catapults me back into his presence. So I go back and forth I'm overwhelmed with the cry of humanity, and I take that into the presence of God, and until I become overwhelmed with his goodness, and I take that back into humanity. And that's where I go. And it's really all about him. It's in him and for him and through him and by him. And if he doesn't show up, if he's not with me, I don't want to go. But I find him again with the oppressed and the marginalized and the naked and the prisoners and the poor and the hungry and the strangers and the least. And so this is what we're born for. So that aching, that longing inside of you is not when you get somewhere, when you find the treasure box and you open it. And if you've just been good enough, then he'll give you some assignment that you probably don't want anyway. It's not how it works. It's the things that you like. It's your strength based. It's again, by putting the paint on the canvas, by putting one foot in front of another and trying things that you like and not repeating the things that you don't like. It's about finding that thing, that your strengths and how you could fit into the body of Christ and becoming a part of a team where it matters if you show up or don't show up, and playing the plays that you can and doing it, whether there's lights and publicity and whether things are going well, or practicing and doing those things even when it doesn't seem to be going well. And so a ship in port is safe, but it's not what ships are built for. And so let's look at this more from a therapeutic standpoint, from the psychological standpoint. Viktor Frankl developed a 3-part process for those that were depressed and suicidal. And Viktor Frankl actually was part of a therapeutic team, and he actually himself had survived 2 concentration camps. And he found that the population that he was working with, the people that were depressed and that were suicidal, he actually had a great deal of success with the 3-part process. And so the first thing that he had them do was identify a project that they could work on, that if they didn't work on it, someone would suffer. The project itself didn't matter. And so I want to ask you really quickly, are you doing something that really matters, that if you don't do it, somebody would suffer? Doesn't matter what the project is, but it matters that it's bigger than you, that it's outside of you, that it affects other people. And the second part of that process was that he had them establish a redemptive perspective on their suffering. We're all going to suffer. Instead of asking, why did that happen? Why do bad things happen? We've already heard by King Solomon that the bad happens to the just and the unjust, that horror is gonna happen. We've already talked about the pits, and we're all gonna end up in a pit. So instead of the why don't we start to look at the who? The who's with us, the who can heal us, the who can change and transform us. So who is he? And as hard as it may be, could we not find something positive on the other side? Because this happened, I will be able to. So that's a redemptive perspective on suffering. So there's post-traumatic stress, and on the opposite side of post-traumatic stress is post-traumatic growth. So could we have growth because of what's happened to me? Not because he caused it, not because he sent it, so that I could have a ministry or that I could do something or that I could whatever. But could I be better on the other side of it? That's post-traumatic growth, the redemptive perspective. And then finally, Viktor Frankl found that in the third part of this process, that we need to take other people with us, that we need a close set of friends. We need a community that accepts us as we are, that we're doing something bigger than ourselves, that we've healed through our past, and the reframing, the new narrative, the new frame that I'm looking through is post-traumatic growth. Remember the woman with the spaghetti sauce. Her post-traumatic growth, her new narrative, her redemptive perspective on that situation when her mom poured spaghetti on her. The redemptive perspective was, mom was hurt and I need to forgive her. And I need to pray for her. But Jesus is so amazing that he put salve on me so that I would not be burned. That's post-traumatic growth. That's a redemptive perspective. And so that's winding us really down to a conclusion. And I'm going to pass the baton to you. And now it's really going to be up to you. Are you going to maintain this or not? I think about when I start a new exercise program and I go into the environment and they give us a tour of everything that we can do. We've been doing indoor rock climbing, and we can climb the boulders, or we can belay, or we can climb the walls, or we can go into the exercise room and here's the rowing machine, and here's the stair stepper, and here's the weights, and here's the treadmill. And now it's up to me. I've been oriented. I passed all the tests that I need to be able to operate safely. And now it's up to me. Either I'm going to go or I'm not. Either I'm going to do this or not. And it leads me to the story about the 5 frogs. Let me ask you this. There are 5 frogs on a log. And 4 out of the 5 frogs decide to jump. How many frogs do you have left? What would you say? Let me say it again. 5 frogs on a log. 4 out of the 5 frogs decide to jump. How many frogs are left? Would you say 1? Or would you say 5? And just because the frogs decide to jump, don't mean they jump. You actually have to jump. And so you have 5 frogs left still on the log. Do not be the frog on the log. There is a huge difference between a dreamer and a doer. And just because you decide, or a decider and a doer, just because you dream and decide doesn't mean that you do. And I want to encourage you that you've actually got to do. You've got to roll up your sleeves. You've got to do the hard work, whether it looks like it's making results or not, whether it feels good or not, whether it takes forever and a day or not, whether you want to be structured and scheduled or not. You have to do the work. There are no shortcuts. And again, I love leadership, and what John Maxwell would say is everybody will pay. There is a price to pay, and either you will pay now or you will pay later, but make no mistake, you will pay. And so what are you willing to do? Are you willing to put in the routine? Are you willing to connect? Are you willing to change your brain and to maintain it? Are you willing to do it for the rest of your life? Are you willing to have a new narrative with how you look at things? We all are created with about the equivalent amount of free time. Are you willing to negotiate your free time? Are you willing to not be self-absorbed? Are you willing to lay down your rights and your pride? Are you willing to not make it all about you? Are you willing to be the thermostat and not the thermometer? And so the choice is really up to you. And it's not that you can't, it's that you won't. And at the end of the day, it actually starts and it finishes with you. You are not a victim. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter how many times. It doesn't matter the extent of the horror. Jesus is bigger than the horror. And we don't have to create cognitive dissonance. We don't have to pretend and hide in shame and fear that those things didn't happen or that we're fine and we're not still struggling. But we have to get accountability and schedule and activities of daily living and routine and self-care and all of those things in place in a community where we can be real and where He's greater than the struggles that I still have, or He's greater than my selfishness, or He's greater when it's hard, or He's greater when somebody dies, or where He's greater when it's not going my way, or He's greater when I just threw a big fit. And so just because you decide, and just because you can see it, and just because it's been prophesied over you, doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's a huge, vast difference between those who actually do day in and day out. And again, quite frankly, if it was easy, if it wouldn't take a community, if it wouldn't take the living Christ being in you and through you, and if it wouldn't take an extended period of time, then it's probably not a big enough thing anyway. And so at the end of the day, this will matter billions of years from now. What you decide to do or not do, heaven will know. And the story is unfolding. And right now, someone somewhere is depending on you to do what God has called you to do. You're plan A. And Jesus in and through you is plan A. There is no plan B. And how many people have told Jesus no thanks? Or have told Jesus yes, but? And so I want to conclude this session with what David Platt says. He said, I want you to live today for what's going to matter billions of years from now. So there's something bigger. There's something greater. And if you're sensing that thing inside of you, then you're right on. There has to be something more to me. Something more to me obtaining, something more than me just getting the next, latest, greatest, something that I'll be challenged with, something that will require everything in me, all that I have, something that will make me rely on the King of the universe and know Him and make Him known, something that I'll have to have a team for, something that will enable me to fall more and more in love with Him and more in love with others, because after all, the greatest commands are to love God with everything in us and to love our neighbor as ourselves. I'll see you in the very conclusion of all of this.